On a quiet August morning in Anchorage, Alaska, the world's eyes turned to an unlikely stage. This was no ordinary political gathering. This was the moment when Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, two of the most polarizing figures of our time, met face to face in one of the most anticipated summits of the decade. For weeks, speculation had run wild. Would the war in Ukraine finally see a path toward peace? Or would this meeting end the same way so many before it had? Grand gestures, but little substance.
As Air Force One touched down on Alaskan soil, Trump appeared calm, even triumphant, stepping onto a red carpet rolled out with deliberate symbolism. Just hours later, a Russian aircraft carried Vladimir Putin into the same frozen landscape. Cameras captured the moment their hands met. A firm handshake, a polite smile. Behind the flash of cameras, however, lay agendas heavy with tension and the weight of a world desperate for answers. The stage had been set with dramatic flair. Above the heads of the gathered press, B-2 stealth bombers streaked across the Alaskan sky in a show of American might. It was a carefully designed spectacle, sending a message that negotiations would not erase the reality of power. Yet as both leaders stepped behind closed doors, far from the red carpets and military displays, the real struggle began. Inside, the conversation stretched on for nearly 3 hours. There were no reporters, no live broadcasts, no immediate leaks. Only the voices of two men, separated by culture and ideology, but bound together by the war that continues to consume Ukraine. Trump, ever the negotiator, pushed Putin with his trademark directness, "End the fighting, make a deal, bring the bloodshed to an end." Putin, measured and calculating, pushed back. He warned Ukraine and its European allies not to interfere, not to throw a wrench into talks that might shape the future. At one point, he made a provocative remark. If Trump had been president earlier, the war in Ukraine would never have begun. The conversation was not filled with shouting or threats. It was a game of chess, each move carefully placed, each word chosen with precision. Trump presented himself as the deal maker, Putin as the patient strategist. For 3 hours, the world waited, wondering if history was being rewritten behind those guarded doors. And then, just as quickly as it began, the summit was over. The doors opened, and both men stepped forward to face the press. There were no signed documents, no grand announcements, no flashing of papers held aloft. Instead, there were carefully chosen words. Trump declared the talks very productive, emphasizing that progress had been made, but admitting that no agreement had been reached. Putin echoed the sentiments, warning against provocations and hinting that further dialogue was possible. In a surprising twist, he extended an invitation to Trump to come to Moscow in the future. The optics were powerful. The symbolism was impossible to ignore. Red carpets, bombers in the sky, and a handshake on American soil. But beneath the surface, the reality was sobering. There was no ceasefire, no roadmap for peace, no end to the war that has scarred Ukraine and shaken Europe. Reactions came swiftly. In Kyiv, outrage erupted. President Volodymyr Zelensky and his government felt undermined by Trump's call for Ukraine to make a deal. For many Ukrainians, this sounded less like diplomacy and more like pressure to accept painful concessions. In European capitals, leaders voiced concern. They reminded the world that peace in Ukraine could not be negotiated without Ukraine itself. For them, the summit was not a breakthrough, but a dangerous signal that their voices might be sidelined. Analysts, too, were divided. Some described the meeting as a nothing burger, a show without substance, a carefully staged performance that gave Putin the publicity he craved, without delivering any real progress. Others argued that even the absence of an agreement mattered. The simple act of meeting, of shaking hands and speaking face-to-face, sent signals that the world cannot afford to ignore. Because in geopolitics, gestures are not empty. They ripple outward, shaping perceptions and strategies. For Putin, the summit was proof that he still commands attention on the global stage, despite sanctions, despite accusations of war crimes, despite international isolation. For Trump, it was a chance to show his style of diplomacy: direct, transactional, unpredictable, unchanged from his previous years in office. The question now is not what was said in Alaska, but what happens next. Will this meeting be remembered as a turning point?
A prelude to genuine negotiations? Or will it fade into history as just another stage spectacle, remembered more for its images than its outcomes? What is certain is that the war in Ukraine continues. The bombs still fall. Families remain displaced. Soldiers continue to die. And while Trump and Putin smiled for the cameras, nothing has changed for those living under fire. The Alaska summit, for all its red carpets and rhetoric, did not stop the bloodshed. Yet, history teaches us that diplomacy is rarely about single breakthroughs. It is about signals, about testing the waters, about preparing for possibilities. This summit may not have ended the war, but it revealed the intentions, the strengths, and the weaknesses of two leaders whose choices will shape the future. For Ukraine, it was a reminder that its struggle for survival cannot depend on others' negotiations. For Europe, it was a warning that alliances must remain united. For the United States, it was proof that Trump's approach to foreign policy, showmanship mixed with negotiation, still carries enormous consequences. And so, the world watches. The handshake in Alaska will be remembered. The words spoken in that closed room will echo in future negotiations. But whether those words lead to peace or to more uncertainty remains unknown. The summit in Alaska may not have ended a war, but has opened a chapter that forces us to ask difficult questions. Was this the beginning of a path to peace? Or was it, as critics say, nothing more than theater? A stage play designed to project strength without deliver solutions. Only time will answer.